we can't know, nobody can know how this whole system works that we're in, that we're a part of, that we are, but we don't know how it works really. Ultimately, it is a mystery, but it still can be fun to talk about the things that we've experienced as an individual on our unique unfolding. Each person experiences things differently, and a lot of that can be quite sort of metaphysical in nature. And it doesn't mean that your journey will be the same. So for instance, in this video, I'll talk about past lives, but it's not necessary to believe in past lives to go through an awakening. It's not necessary at all. But for some people, like myself, it was a big part of my journey. So there's no right or wrong with this, but we don't know ultimately how it all works. But I'll just tell you what I have, I've sort of put the pieces together as to how it might work, perhaps, as this has unfolded over the years. So for me, I started seeing past lives when I was about 20. So I'd always been sort of psychically tuned, you could say, and so that was just another element to that. So that wasn't weird for me, and I don't ever remembering a time where I didn't think that there were past lives. It always made sense to me. So it was more like an intuition, I guess. And then I started to explore past lives and see how I could see them and learn from them. So I did that, really, I think it was in my early 20s where I saw my first one. And over time, I got more interested in it and got some past life regressions, and eventually ended up training and became a past life regressionist myself at one stage. So it was of big interest to me. But the way I worked with clients, and I no longer work with clients in this way, so please don't book in for a past life session with me. I do not do them. Now I'm an awakening mentor. So, but there are plenty of good ones out there. But my focus when I was doing them was healing. It was looking for karmic patterns, repeating patterns that I had noticed that we have in our own life, this life we're in now, that they were also in the past lives. And when I started working with a lot of clients in that way, I noticed there were certain themes that repeated and certain core wounds, and, like I'm unlovable, that repeated through the past lives that were also carried into this life. And so it just gave another way to heal some of these wounds, to go back further than this life, even though you can just heal it on the level of this life. That really does work. But you could go all the way back into the past lives and you could heal it in that way as well. And so for some people that resonated. And for me, that was a part of my journey. It wasn't the entire picture at all. I did more work on this life than I did on past lives, but I certainly saw a lot, I would say over 100 past lives, and did a lot of healing and on that level. So it certainly does work. So what I established through being a past life regressionist and through my own journey, which then led into awakening, and then I used it as part of my awakening healing path, is that I could see that there was something that reincarnates. So we could call this soul. I like to think of it more like an energy, a line of energy that comes in, that is consciousness, that is what we are, and it comes into form and out of form and into form and out of form. I see it more like that, but we'll just call it soul for the ease of the understanding of the video. So soul comes in and out of form, and with that, the karmic load, the things that have not had a chance to heal in the past lives, they get carried with that. So it is like attached to the soul, or perhaps it is the soul, the karma. And so in each time the reincarnation happens and you come back into form, you have this opportunity to heal the karma again, to heal those karmic patterns and those core wounds that you've had operating for this whole line, for however long that line of consciousness has been reincarnating. And when that karma is healed, then you have a spiritual awakening. So it's tied into that. So, but I'll go into that into some more depth. So basically, I see the reincarnation process as an opportunity to heal the karma, to get another chance to heal the karma. So some people can sort of think of karma as feeling quite disempowering. It's like you did things in past lives that you don't know what you did, and then you're being punished for it in this life. I don't really see it that way. I was very open always to seeing my shadow side in this life and my shadow side in past lives. For me, it only made sense that I had been all different types of characters in past lives. And I discovered that I had been the persecutor as much as I'd been the victim. I'd played all roles. And for me, that wasn't hard to acknowledge and accept, but a lot of people do struggle with that for whatever reason. But I'd say it's probably the case for everyone. There's a good mix in there of all different experiences that we've had. We weren't always the nice person that we are in this life, going through an awakening. And it's totally fine, because we are all things. That's what oneness is. We are absolutely everything. So it totally makes sense from that perspective as well, that you would have done a lot of different things in past lives. So I wouldn't say it's punishment so much, but it is a healing. It's a learning that takes place, and there were things that I wouldn't say I ever felt like I was punished in this life, but I certainly had a very difficult life and a very high karmic load, very high trauma load, and I see those two things as related. So the amount of karma you have is a match for the two parents that you have, and so your energetic line is a match for their energetic lines. So in a sense, you have similar karma. Your karma is a match between their two karma loads, and then that creates your new incarnation, and that can be a lot of karma, of course, because we've, who knows how many lives and how many experiences and how many things you didn't get to heal in the past. It would make sense that there would be a lot there. Well, it makes sense to me anyway. So if the soul has experienced a lot, and so we come back in, and when we have difficult parents, usually that's an indicator of that you've got a lot of karma. That's how I see it. So you have challenging parents or a challenging environment that you're born into, and the trauma starts. So you get traumatized through your childhood, and that starts the karma load being kicked into manifestation again. And then it flows on from there, and you have your life, and then you have an opportunity to heal it in that life and see if that happens. So healing, I'm talking about therapy. I'm talking about psychological healing, mostly is what I'm talking about, and perhaps past life regression, that type of healing on that level could play into that as well. And so what seems to happen is certain people, when they have started healing some of their karma or a lot of their karma, they start to wake up. They start to remember who they are. And we really have no indication on what is the switch, how much karma you need to have for this to happen, why it happens to some people and not others, but it just seems to happen. So some people seem to incarnate with a low karma load, and these people often don't go very deeply into the trance of separation. So I sort of see the karma load as how deep you will go into believing you're a person. So like me, I had a high karma load, which means I had a high trauma load, which means I had difficult parents and a difficult childhood. And it means I went very deeply into the trance. I very much believed I was Shar and was very caught up in that story until awakening started happening. So that's another thing. That's just how I perceive it. Whether it's true or not, who knows? But I sort of see the more karma load, the deeper the karma load, the deeper the trauma, and the deeper the trance that you go into, the more you believe you're a person, and the stickier it is, and the harder it is to break out of it, which makes sense because you've got all these karmic patterns and wounds and traumas and everything that's just keeping the illusion happening over and over again. So yes, getting back, some people seem to incarnate with a low trauma load, and perhaps they've gone through awakening to some degree in past lives. We could guess that. Again, we don't really know, but say they got to unity consciousness in the past life, but they hadn't got all the way to the end, to the no self shift, which if you want to know about the permanent shifts of awakening, I'd probably watch the stages of awakening video that I have. That explains those shifts. So perhaps they didn't get all the way to the end, but they got pretty far in past lives. Then they seem to incarnate with that trauma load, which would be less because they've worked through it all in past lives, worked through nearly all of it. They come in with a small karma load, and so they've got good parents, they have a pretty easy childhood, and they still have a yearning for truth. They have a strong enlightenment drive, and they go through awakening maybe quite young. It's not like a really challenging path where they're having to do a lot of psychological healing. It's more maybe like meditation or something like that, a shorter path perhaps. And then they're able to go back to the unity consciousness level relatively easy because they didn't have like that big trauma load that was sort of getting in the way. Then they're able to go past that to the final no self shift more easily. So that's kind of how I see how the process could work, where people could, if this is the life where you've come in like me with a really high trauma load and karma load, then that's not the life that I just described there. So this is the alternative type of awakening that happens, and this seems to be more common, or at least for the people I work with perhaps. And that is that we come in, we've got a lot that we're carrying. We've got a lot of karmic baggage to work through and to heal before we can have these shifts stick, before we can be able to be permanently awake. And so it takes a lot of work because there is a lot of layers to get through. There's a lot of identities, a lot of beliefs that have come off the back of trauma and karma and the trauma imprints that are in the body and the nervous system, and these very sticky core wounds that perhaps have been going for lifetimes. And so that's really hard to break. It's a very long process. It's totally possible. I did it myself. It was hard, but it is totally doable. And it just might take more work than someone else that's on a path where they don't have as much karma and they can just meditate. So if you're on a path that sounds similar to mine, I would suggest it's really about therapy. That's really the core of what the path is about. It's about psychological healing, getting the psyche as healthy as possible, as well as the awakening path. And it's also not helpful to compare your path to other people or people that have come before you, or teachers that have come before you, or even traditions where they meditated and could wake up that way, because often those pathways are not relevant for someone with a high karmic load. You might be able to do it that way, but you might have to meditate for 50 years or something to do it that way. So meditation certainly supports working through karma. I've seen that in my own experience. But for most of us, with the amount of karma that we have now, I'd say it might not be sufficient. So let's see where to go to now. So it's a pretty big topic. So that explains how we reincarnate. Awakening starts to happen for certain people. You may have a high karma load or a low karma load, and they're kind of two different awakening paths. There's a lot more than that, but just overall, generally speaking, you sort of go into two categories. And then I guess if you want to say what the point is, or what the unfolding is that is happening, is that it's the soul's journey, or that line of consciousness that's reincarnating, and then hopefully getting less karma because it's being healed through therapy, and life is getting easier, and the awakening is getting easier, however long that takes, the process. And then you get to a point where you are starting to not just wake up, but it's starting to become a permanent way of being, because you've healed enough of the karma, you're clear enough in the system for it to stick, basically. So when that starts happening, then there's the 3 shifts that I have referred you to, that other video: the mind awakening, the heart awakening, unity consciousness, and the gut awakening, no self. And I see the soul's pathway as ending at the 3rd shift. I see that that's the end of the soul's journey, you could put it that way. So that's just how it was shown to me in a vision. So whether it's true or not, who knows, but that's what was shown to me. And so it was when that shift is completed, and the self-reflective mechanism, which I won't get into, but I've spoken about in other videos, but when that final shift happens and you can no longer self-reflect, then that's called no self, sometimes, that shift. And when that shift happens, that's the end of that soul's journey. So it's not going to reincarnate anymore. That body will live out its days, and that will be the end of that stream of consciousness coming back into form. It's the end of that journey, the end of that soul's journey. So, you know, it's not a good thing or a bad thing. It's just like anything in nature, things come to an end. So it's I guess a death of sorts, perhaps the ultimate death, who can say, but it's not a good or bad thing or whatever. It's just the end of a cycle. It very much feels like you come all the way around and come back to the beginning, basically. It's got this sense of a cycle completing.